Today, I'm joined by one of my poker athlete students, Scott Hedley. Now, I wanted to bring Scott on the channel today as his story is going to be very inspiring for any of you who aren't quite where you want to be in your poker career. For those of you who aspire to play higher stakes, who want to be making more money, who want to have more success in life in poker, but something's just not clicking. You're not quite where you want to be. Some of you might even be thinking about quitting poker and taking on other jobs or other career paths. And this is where Scott was. There was actually a point not long ago where Scott had to become a delivery driver on the side of his poker career, as he had to be realistic that he didn't have the income and he had to make ends meet with a side job. So what I love about Scott's journey is he stayed dedicated, he kept the belief high, and he found a way to develop the skills that were needed to have a flourishing poker career. And today, he's going to share how he learned those skills and how you can learn them as well. Now, if you do get inspired by Scott's story and you would like to follow in his footsteps, I'm excited to announce that I've reopened my Poker Athlete program. It is limited to 10 spots, and I'll be selecting those players over the coming week. So if you'd like to be one of those, click on the link in the description, fill out the short application form, and I'll be reaching out to you with the next steps. With that being said, let's dive into my conversation with Scott. All right, Scott, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, it's nice to be here, Adam. Thank you.
All right, this conversation is going to be very interesting. I'm looking forward to mapping out your journey from trying to make poker work for a long time. I think what's going to be very interesting about this conversation is you were trying to make poker work for ages and not really had much success. So let's go back to your start of your poker career, early in your days. Talk us through how you were trying to make things work and what were some things that potentially weren't working right around then.
I'll just clarify that there were moments of financial success, but in reality, it was never going to work at those different times where I had some financial success, which we'll get into, just because there were some frameworks in terms of how to live my life that I just didn't have any clue about. And that's where I feel this program really helped. But where my whole poker career started was 2014. I was playing ice hockey through my teenage years, but I had these strange aspirations of trying to take it somewhere because I was kind of jaded by the idea of trying to find like a legitimate career kind of thing. So it was one of those things where I was like, okay, let me try to find a glitch in the matrix so I can do something. Hockey was never going to work. But in 2014, I was just watching sports on TV, and then there's an advertisement for Poker Stars, and I was like, I'm 18, I can play on this site. Let me try and make some money here. And I proceeded to lose at the time a fair amount of money, all my like summer job money kind of thing. So that was fun. And from there, I was like, okay, I find this game really interesting, but I'm obviously very bad at it. So I got to learn how to get better. So I just went as hard as I could with finding free content on YouTube. And it was one of those things where like I was supposed to go to university. I took like a gap year, and I was just like really just thinking to myself, okay, I got to find a way to make poker work. I was watching all these like Poker After Dark things because it was like 2014 at the time. So just like highlights on YouTube from that. And then I just got started with some tournaments, and it was in October of 2015 where I got extremely lucky, and I had $100 to my name, and I threw $3 into this satellite, which got me into a large field tournament on Poker Stars where 5 hours later, it was a turbo. It's like winning the lottery. I won 14.5K, and I recorded it too. So it's kind of funny just looking at it here and there. I put it up on YouTube, where just hearing the sheer excitement in my voice and just kind of knowing what my thoughts were at the time, just thinking to myself, man, maybe I shouldn't have won that money at the time, because it set me on a path where like, even though for the next year, I was just really hardcore with trying to make full-time poker work. So now I had a bankroll. It was one of those things where I just had no life experience, limited poker experience, but one of those things where I just had no clue in hindsight how to manage the two together, and obviously burned out like a year later. So that's the start of it. I'll let you interject now if you'd like to, Adam, but that's how the first part went.
Yeah, so you mentioned you didn't have the right frameworks back there. So no matter what happened, you almost said it was not going to work out. Talk us through what were the frameworks you felt you were missing during that time?
So I would lose 2 weeks in a row and think the sky was falling. So there's perspective. I would, I would lose for 2 weeks in a row. And keep in mind, I was playing tournaments. So this is completely within the realm of possibility a lot. So I didn't have any resilience. I would just kind of like lay in bed a lot, just think like, oh, how am I going to make this work? Like I've told my family I'm going to do this, and they didn't think it was a good idea. And now they're going to be proven right. And then I remember all the time, like I had roommates and they were living underneath me and they would keep telling me to stop like pounding my fist on the table. I would take just normal bad beats. I just like pound the table, which is just to me just a foreign concept now because it's like it's just so standard. But at the time, this used to just impact me just really badly. And also when I would win, I would just be on cloud nine, which I still experience some winners tilt now, but it's to a much, much lesser degree. And when I spot it, I kind of know what tactics to use. What else? Yeah, there were what else? I'm just thinking through like I know there's a stress mastery aspect of the course which I use now in terms of deep breathing to calm myself down or rev myself up, which I just had no concept for at the time. I just whatever was happening, if I was tired, if I was energized to way too much, it's just what I was going to be rolling with for the session, for better or for worse. And energy optimization, I was playing a lot of ice hockey and doing well with like weights and stuff like that in high school, and then that just totally fell off a cliff when I did poker. I was just all hours of the night, all hours of the day, sleeping, awake, whatever, just ordering a lot of pizza, just like everything was just terrible. So I had no frameworks in terms of all that kind of stuff, basically.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? When we get into poker, we think it's a strategy game that we need to solve. So we're like, all right, let's solve this strategy game. Once I get good at the technical side of the game,
Right, yeah.
it'll be easy. I crush. And then you realize, wait a second, I get a bit stressed when I'm playing poker. When I win, I feel really good. When I lose, I feel really bad. All of a sudden, I feel all these internal emotions when I'm playing this game and I'm struggling to play my best poker. I'm running out of energy. I'm like, what is going on? And all these things come to the surface. I think it's the evolution of you as a person, but also as a poker player to solve these problems. So you mentioned a lot of them, which we'll go into: perspective, resilience, stress mastery, energy optimization. These are kind of the poker athlete skills I teach, but these are the kind of the frameworks of being a high performer, a high performing human on planet Earth. But if you're going to be a
Yeah.
poker player, you've got to really understand, like, oh wait, I've got to work on these skills. And most people, myself included, had not developed these naturally. It wasn't something that I got taught at school. It wasn't something I learned just being around my friends. These are skills that you have to kind of go through the trenches and actually learn them. So we'll go into your journey to developing these skills as we go. But let's take us back to the next chapter. I think the next chapter
Yep.
was, I think you took a staking deal. Yeah, so talk us through the next evolution from this point.
So basically that failed, and that was 2017. You know, did some other stuff, tree planting, had to find myself, whatever. 2018, I find a staking deal through a backing site online that works for a while because it actually implements some structure. They, you know, the people that are there, they're like, okay, Scott, we can see some potential in how you think about the game, but here are different ways that you need to be structured in terms of like homework assignments, some health stuff. At the time, they were employing Elliott Rowe, but they were doing it for like their higher stakes guys. So they had a different guy for our kind of group. So that kind of opened my eyes to, okay, you know, there's ways to this game that I need to be just operating on a day-to-day basis that I wasn't even aware of before. So that was cool. But then we kind of had a falling out of like about half a year to a year later just because of some disagreements. And so then I decided, okay, like I'll just get a job in the meantime now, and just kind of like grind some live poker, which is very low stakes one too. But I was still trying to work on my game in different ways, and then still using some of the frameworks from that backing site. And then it was in late 2019, early 2020 when some poker friends who I'd met through the live poker stuff, who had more money than I did, they were like, "Hey, let's stake you for this 2-5 game," which is the game I'm playing now, by the way. Let's take you for this 2-5 game and let's put you in some of these tournaments. They had more faith in me in the tournaments because of the backing stuff, but because the cash games ran more frequently, I did that. But a couple months later, I was able to, again, like Luckbox. I say Luckbox because it was the biggest opportunity live game that was in my area, and I happened to be the one that won it. Like there was all these other smaller tournaments, but there was a 1K that came to my hometown like once a year, and it had like, I don't know, at least 100 or 150, maybe 200 entrants. And then I won it for 40K. I had 40% of it. So it was one of those situations where I was excited to play more games from there. But then COVID happened 2 weeks later. And so I was like, okay, let's transition to online. Let's do this kind of thing. Again, I was doing some staking stuff, and I was able to go on another heater there, win a bunch of games throughout the summer. But it was later on in the year when there was all the COVID lockdown stuff happening, when I became just kind of depressed in general. In hindsight, again, it would have been nice if I just had some perspective on it all. And, I could use the things from the poker athlete program in different ways at different times. Like in 2016, it was obvious just for poker and living as a human in general. But in 2020, it would have been nice to just have the perspective of like, okay, in some capacity, this will pass at some point. Focus on what I can control in the short term now. and the program would have allowed me to succeed at that point. Yeah, anyway, I kind of lost my train of thought a bit there, but it was just one of those things where I'm glad I have the program now because I feel a lot more confident moving forward. But anyway, that's the second iteration where it kind of failed over time. Because then I guess I just did some dumb stuff later in 2021 where I just felt kind of hopeless and all that stuff, and things were out of my control. I didn't focus at all on what I could control, and I just kind of did a lot of stupid, leverage trading with crypto. So I blew my bankroll in that way. But yeah, that's the second iteration of failure. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I like that you're linking. If you had the skills, the programming skills at that time, it would have been much easier to navigate that. But this time you were trying to figure things out, and I think this was the challenge of you during this time. Your intentions are really good. You're trying to make things work, but things are getting challenging. So you mentioned having that big success and that kind of 40K win, and then COVID happens. That must have been very frustrating because like you just get
Oh,
some
it was.
momentum,
Yeah.
and you're
I was
like,
tilted for several weeks, but then it was one of those things where I saw the games were online, so it was easy to transition to that. But I had better routines in live poker at that time, which I'm implementing again now, where I have a friend who was starting up a gym business at the time, who obviously had struggled after that. But I was like going to him for workouts and like personal training and stuff at a discounted rate. And it was really great for my mental health and everything because, the social stuff with him, the physical working out, and then he had really good eating habits too. So we kind of like fed off each other on that. It's one of those things where I was able to, during the delivery period later, which we'll talk about, I reflected on like, okay, what were the good aspects of these different failed periods and what can I like, how can I improve? And then I'll just implement the good stuff in with it too. So anyway,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, lots of lessons get learned along the way. I like that as well, where we think sometimes we should be in a very linear progression. Everything should go smoothly. We should make the right choice at the right time. But sometimes the setbacks, like there's things to be learned during that time. Like you reflect on it, looking back and go, actually the lesson I need to learn during this patch was this thing. So yeah, I think to yourself, there was lots of growth going on here. So during COVID, talk us through how things kind of didn't go to plan. Because obviously you mentioned you transitioned from playing live to online. The games were quite soft, quite juicy. I remember during that time I was with lots of players who were really excited how good the games had got all of a sudden. So talk us through like how that period went for you and why maybe it didn't have a big takeoff for you.
So it worked at first. It worked for probably the first 6 to 8 months. It was when it got just kind of dark and cold outside. And it was one of those things too, where in hindsight, I'd made not a great decision to move in with my now ex-girlfriend. We moved in together. It was one of those things where our lifestyles didn't really gel that well. So I wanted to grind a lot. And it was one of those things where we had communication issues with how we were going to spend time together. Especially when I'm trying to grind MTTs all the time, which are very unpredictable in terms of when you actually make money, it'll go longer than expected, that kind of stuff. So it was one of those things where then home games, I wanted to go back to live poker to kind of get my routines better and kind of transition to live cash games because of the more predictable times. But then it was one of those things where there was a mix of, I didn't really resonate with the degeneracy that well, or more rather that I couldn't manage it very well. I think now if I did it, I would just be very selective with the home games that I went to and just kind of be upfront with like, hey, like, I'm a reg, like if you need a seat to fill kind of thing, like it's just, here's what you're going to get in terms of a guy who's probably not going to drink, or maybe have like one to like, make it not so obvious that I'm doing what I'm doing. But it's one of those things where at the time, it was my first exposure to kind of underground games at the time because of the COVID stuff. And I just didn't respond to the degeneracy very well. I just felt like I'm getting depressed. I'm like, oh, do I even like poker if this is the environment I'm going to be surrounded by all the time? Now I'm just more mentally prepared if I do go into that environment, what to expect. But it was also tough too because of the whole COVID thing, like in terms of different people's paranoia with the virus and stuff like that. I know that my ex had like, grandparents that she would go visit all the time. So it was one of those things where it was just difficult to manage that period of time, which is why I then was like, all right, let me try this crypto thing. But it was out of desperation. So that's why it was a very bad decision in hindsight. Yeah. So it was one of those things where once the next year came around in 2022, and I was like, okay, I just need to do something that's like stable and figure what my values are, figure that stuff out. I didn't realize at the time like how much the self-awareness aspect of the poker athlete course would help cement these core values for me, or like help me really dive deep into them so I could think through them more. Which is why I spent as much time as I did on that part of the course. I did, because it helped just everything else. But yeah, in hindsight, in 2022, it was like, okay, just gotta take a big step back, figure out what the heck I'm doing. That's basically how we got to that point. So yeah.
Yeah, so this time you took a step back and you started to be a delivery driver. So talk us through like what was going through your mind during that. So I like the the self-awareness enough to go, right, things aren't working out. I need to like kind of reflect and see what my kind of values are. So you took a step back from poker and started doing the delivery driving. Were you still thinking on your mind, I'm going to make some money and then make poker work? Or how were you kind of balancing stuff at this point?
Yeah, it was one of those things where at first, so I just knew I needed to just, it was annoying because I was like, I felt so passionate about poker itself in terms of just, I look back in different time periods of my poker career. And especially when I was with the poker backing group, like, a few years prior, it was one of those things where we would have coaches come in and show us like, PO solver. It was like this new thing at the time kind of thing. I was like, oh, this is so fascinating. You get to see like the EVs of every different decision based on different things that happen. I remember just being so fascinated by that. So just thinking years later during the delivery driver stuff, like, man, I really love the how the mechanics of like poker work. And it's just the environment that I've subjected myself to, either in like a dark room, like, doing the online stuff, like, and not really having many friends, or whether I'm in the live poker and the people around me are just, I had to go on their terms because it was home games. And then I kind of had to do the things that they wanted to, and it didn't help me have like healthy, like living patterns. So it was one of those things like, man, I love the game, but I'm having so many conflicts with what's happening in the real world with it. I just need to take a step back and figure out what's happening. So yeah, in the back of my mind, I was like, well, I guess I'll just wait out this COVID thing and figure out at the time then. I just wasn't really sure. I just needed some stable income. I felt I would come back to poker at some point. I didn't know what capacity. That's basically what was happening at the time there. Yeah.
So the delivery driving, talk us through when that transitioned into, okay, I'm get back into poker. And during the driving, I'm imagining like just long hours of just daydreaming about poker. Can I go back to it? Were you missing poker? Were you instantly going, right, I don't want to do this long term and I want to go back to poker? Talk us through like your mind then. Also then, when did you start to transition back into poker and start playing more full time again?
Yeah. So it was nice in the summer of 2022, driving along in the countryside in the summer. It helped me be more present. I did countryside deliveries. So it was really nice because I was just in nature a lot. And I think that helped me gain more presence. There was definitely good things about the delivery driving thing. It allowed me to just kind of stop thinking so much about what's going to happen in the future. It's like, okay, what can I just control right now? That was the good part of it then. Then the winter came. And so Christmas deliveries, which was like 10+ hour days. And then it's like snow. And I'm like, okay, now I definitely need to just have an exit plan. So that's when I really got into the poker thing. And it was the beginning of the year in January of this year when I'm like, okay, I went through all my subscriptions on YouTube, which was a lot of junk. I just got rid of everything related to anything that wasn't poker. And I went through the most recent videos of the channels I'd been subscribed to. I had subscribed to you back in 2020, briefly. Not briefly, like I subscribed to you and I watched a couple of your videos. And there was this one that I'll never forget, but I couldn't find again when I looked into it. You had said something, and this is back in like 2020. You had said, what did you say? And I watched it in 2020 and thought, man, like, how am I going to figure this out? But you're like, okay, once you've made some money to get out of like the rat race trap, this is when I had like, 30, 40K or something. So I felt a little more comfortable. I was like, you had said, oh yeah, what are you going to do once you're not like trying to get away from the bottom? But it was rather like, how are you going to kind of fulfill yourself moving forward? I guess maybe, I'm not really sure. Sorry, Adam, I'm kind of drawing a blank. There was something that you had said, it resonated with me in terms of like, I didn't know what the answer was at the time, in terms of like, how are you going to find fulfillment once you've made enough money in poker to like pay your bills and feel confident in what you're doing. And then from there, it's like, what's the next chapter? Because it's like a deep blue ocean at that point. You can choose anything. To me, that was overwhelming back in 2020. And that was kind of what coincided with the whole depression thing. It was early January, once I like found your channel again and looked through your content and saw this poker athlete content. That's when I knew that I had to use the content to get better.
I think so. The concept I was maybe 2020 I was talking about was when you get to a certain point, so like out of that kind of survival mode where you're paying bills, trying to get by, you get to this next stage where you need to start setting goals that are more like thriving towards the future. And you need to stop functioning on like kind of the old like adrenaline, cortisol, getting stuff done. And now you need to design the future that you want. And a lot of people get stuck in this mode where they can't decide the path for themselves. They're like, okay, like I'm out of the kind of making bills. And then they plateau. Like some people are really good when there's emergency bills due, that things are in the short term a bit volatile. People are very motivated, but you don't want to live in that state. That's very, very survival driven. But then once you get out of that state, all of a sudden, like you said, like the deep blue ocean, like what next? So when you get to like 50K or 100K roll, there's a certain point where it's like, okay, my lifestyle doesn't change by adding more money to my bankroll. What I do in my life doesn't change. I can live the life I want to now. Obviously I can't go crazy and buy a million things, but I'm pretty comfortable with my lifestyle. Okay, now what do I want this journey to be about? How do I feel fulfilled? How do I feel a sense of, yeah, kind of fulfillment in my life? And that's when you need to get in touch with your values, understand who you are, and what's meaningful to you. So yeah, you mentioned like getting into my channel like 2020. So I think probably 2021 was when I started to conceptualize the poker athlete concept. Prior to that, I was doing lots of content. I probably did 3 years of mindset performance content on YouTube prior to that. But I started to really think about this concept of being an athlete and really training your mind and body to perform at a high level, and what skills do you need to develop. So we've talked about some today. So for you, you mentioned getting back into my content around the start of this
Started
year.
this year. Yeah.
Yeah, so I remember you were very in the comments on my YouTube videos, you're always like leaving big paragraphs, and you always like, can't wait for the next kind of program, keep me updated. So yeah, tell me for like what you were learning from the content this year, and how was that changing how you were approaching either poker or life?
So the first thing I changed at the start of this year was just my diet. It was one of those things where I had gotten into this not so great habit with the deliveries where I just get takeout food afterwards. I wasn't eating enough. Once I started changing my diet by just eating more but eating cleanly, I'd have like potatoes, rice, pasta ready. So for the complex carbs, I have meats ready, which is just, it was most of the time a lot of just like chicken, beef, and pork. But in the time since, I've switched out pork with fish, salmon specifically, after there was another comment thread that we had this summer where you're talking about like getting those omega-3s and fatty or oily fish in your diet. So I've done that a lot more, and just eating a lot more. Like I bring nuts to the table now. It's one of those things where it just gives me that sustained energy. Basically, and also lots of fruits and lots of vegetables, but just having them ready. So that way it was easy for me to have nutritious food, convenient and ready to go. And then it'd be more difficult for me to actually get junk food. I actually have to just take a 5-minute walk and go to the store instead of just like 2 seconds to my fridge or cupboard. So that's what I started doing at the start of this year, as well as just consistently working out as much as I could in the morning. And then I would just play online as much as I could in terms of the online cash games here. I live in Canada and Ontario, so it's a segregated pool. So it's nice because it is softer than the global pool. I would do that at the start of this year, and then I found all your content. Well, I mean, I already had found it, but I really started finding it. Like I just kept diving into everything that you had, because I was like thinking to myself, man, if I had these at different points in my career, whether it was 2016 or 2020, maybe I wouldn't have been as receptive to it earlier because I wouldn't have appreciated it. I think back to 2016, how I would have needed it most back then. I probably would have been least receptive to it, which is the irony of it. But now it's like, okay, like I think I reached out to you at one point. I was like, okay, I'm spending a lot of time doing deliveries. Are there any like audiobooks that I can listen to when I finish all your videos? And you're like, okay, like there's the David Goggins Resilience one, and there's the Michael Singer one. And the Goggins one was fun to listen to, and I learned a lot from that. The Michael Singer one, at first, it was like listening to something from a foreign planet. It was just like kind of like stepping back into your mind and looking out through like the lens. It was looking out through the, I mean, I'm going to butcher it. It was just one of those things where it felt so foreign, and I didn't resonate with it at first, and then I got about halfway and it kind of just clicked. And that's when I think I improved a lot with emotional regulation at that time, just because now things will happen to the table, and then I'll see like mini flare-ups of different things that'll happen. Like I used to get hot flashes whenever maybe a bad reg would make a call and win that I thought was incorrect, but it was like the small amount of times I'd have a bluff in my range or something, and I would just get annoyed. And now I can, if anything like that happens, I just sit back and observe. I'm like, okay, like these are the emotions I'm experiencing, and now that's my default. Whereas I had to like manually do it earlier this year. It's like the things from that book, which I can't recall now, but when they come up, it's one of those things that are just automatic for me. That one was really beneficial. So that was from one of your videos from earlier this year. And you had more videos like that where you would recommend these different ways you can learn further. And I just was so fascinated by it, because I was like, okay, this will not only make me a better poker player, but also just a better functioning human being. So that's why I was really attracted to the program. Yeah, that's basically how that got started.
Yeah, I remember you in the comments going, I'm struggling with this. Like, I want to get more like awareness of myself, my thoughts, and what's going on internally. And I was just getting Michael Singer is the guy to go to. So personally, obviously, different coaches, different teachers resonate with different people. I think Michael Singer is the best teacher of the concept of zooming out and just watching the mind's processes. And he's got this whole thing of like this voice in your head. There's a voice in your head that we've all got, and really like breaking it down into very simple terms that almost anyone can relate to. As he said, like you can be put off a little bit by like the kind of spiritual talk. He's actually very centered. I think Michael Singer, he's got a business background. He doesn't speak in any kind of wishy-washy talk. He's very practical. He talks about things
Yeah, I
that
agree.
most people can relate to. He's also got very good lecture series. But yeah, I think it opens up a gateway of thinking, I remember when I first started listening to Michael Singer, I listened to it over and over, and I was like, there's something in this that's really, really powerful. I kind of get it, but I just don't quite get it. It took me like many years to like go, this is it. But it opens up a doorway. So when anyone recommends, I don't know what book should I do or read to get started, I always go Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul is a great starting point because it gives you a framework to think about this. Now, at this point, you're trying to work on skills and you're trying to upgrade yourself. You're definitely watching a lot of my free content. And I remember you saying, probably around May or June, you're like, Adam, when's the next program opening? I don't know dates at that time, going, open the next program. So tell me, Freddie, what you were one struggling with during this time, and why were you so keen to get in the program at this time? Because obviously you were absorbing my content on YouTube. What were you keen to learn more of, and what were you kind of struggling with during this period?
So it was one of those things where I guess I'm happy in hindsight that I didn't start it up. I was ready to go in March, but then I was like, like I don't quite have the time to do right now because I'm doing all these deliveries, but I'm gonna I can see based on the trajectory of my money that I'm going to be switching to part-time probably around June or July, and that's when you would start the next program. And I was just working as hard as I could to make sure that I was ready for that. So basically it was kind of like escapism. It was like, okay, when are you starting the next program? I just really wanted to like get started on the next phase of my life because I had been doing a lot of online at the time to just like shorten my skills. And yeah, that was basically the reason. It was nice that I did take an extra, because I could have started back in March, but I'm glad that I'm glad that I spent those extra months in between just trying to like learn the skills as much as I could on my own first. So that way, when I came into the program, I was like, okay, like, here's the stuff that I learned over the past few months on my own. Then here's how I can add on top of it. Because that's what I like about your program is that you give away a fair amount of stuff in the free content. But then once we do the program itself, you dive deeper in a way where I'm like, I never even considered that. So it was one of those things where it was nice to not go into it just totally blank. It was nice to have absorb some of the free stuff first, so that way when I could dive deeper once the program started. So I guess everything worked itself out. But I know at the time I kept messaging you because I just wanted to stop the deliveries. I wanted to just get started in the next phase of my life, basically. So that's how I felt.
Nice. Yeah. So at that point, what was some of like the pain points for you? What were you struggling with? So you still had the delivery drive in. Where were you trying to get to? And what were some of the things that weren't quite clicking at this moment?
I just wasn't where I wanted to be. That was the main thing. It was one of those things where I knew there were going to be challenges ahead. I knew the failures I had in the past with poker. I felt I was on a good trajectory, but I was close, but not financially in a spot where I could take the next step. Because I had a fair amount of overhead with the deliveries because I was doing it as like where I own my own vehicle and was like, paying commercial auto insurance. It was one of those things where like I couldn't just stop. I had to kind of like wait a little bit to stop. So like, okay, like I guess I'll make more money to be ready to go. But it was one of those things where once the spring came, I didn't really have poker related challenges because I wasn't able to dive into poker as much as I really wanted to. It coincided that July, once you did start the next program, is when I was able to switch to part-time. And then after that, tell them it's like, hey, I'm going to go on like indefinite leave, which I'm still on indefinite leave right now. And they're okay. They understand. The boss actually knows, and I'm, doing my best to make poker my full-time thing. And he's like happy for me, all that kind of stuff. So there's no issues there. Yeah, it was one of those things where the struggle I had at the time was that I wasn't in a spot yet where I could experience the struggle poker related. I was just wanting to get to the next step, basically.
Yeah, that's stuck, that bridge, that gap between I'm not quite where I want to be, but how do I close the gap? How do I get there? How do I get to that next threshold? And sometimes we get lost in that kind of moment for quite a while. Like months can pass by, years can pass by. For you knew taking action, joining the program, the Poker Athlete, going very immersive into a coaching program like this could be a gateway. So let's talk about getting started. So for you, I know, like you said, you watched all my content, so you were very keen. I remember you coming into the program early days with your introduction. I was like, all right, Scott's going to be an amazing student because he's like really keen for it, really eager. So tell me through like your first kind of experience of the program. We went deep into self-awareness. So just to get a bit of framework, how I do the program itself, basically we do 8 skills over the course of 8 weeks. We focus on 1 skill per week and we go super deep on that skill. My objective with that skill for the week is basically to teach you everything you need to know about that skill and teach you how to train that skill from your current level to from a beginner to intermediate to elite. And certain skills are going to resonate with certain people. I'm very aware that some people are going to come into the program and go, I'm really good at that skill, bad at that skill. And I try to make it very interactive with assessments. So before you start each skill, you get an assessment to see what your current level is. So you can go, oh, this is a weakness for me, so I need to really try hard this week to improve it. Or this is a strength, I might learn some stuff, and I'm already quite good at it. So for you coming to the program, the first week was self-awareness, which is one of my favorite ones to teach. I think it's probably the deepest module we go. We go super deep into really understanding how your beliefs work, your frameworks, your identity. So yeah, tell me through like how you had the first experience, the first week, and some of the kind of breakthroughs you had going through that.
Well, I love that you put self-awareness first, because once I dove deep into that, it was a situation where after that, every other skill from modules 2 through 8 just felt easier because I just had a clear identity of who I was. So there was many different things in the self-awareness worksheets that caused me to stop and think. I had a whiteboard that I kept writing different things down, coming up with different ideas, trying to just think about different stuff I had internalized over the years in terms of what other people kind of expected of me, what I expected myself, and was that lens through other people. And it's just like, where was it coming from? There was all sorts of questions that module forced me to ask myself. Yeah, and even now thinking about it, it's almost overwhelming. That's why I really liked you didn't put a different module first, because it was like self-awareness, it takes you from wherever you are and puts you in the frame of mind, and just it allows you to just absorb the other concepts better that you teach throughout the program later on. I know for me, there was this one part in self-awareness where there was 5 core values that you had to come up with that were true to yourself, and list them from like 1 through 5. And that's when I realized it's like, okay, for me, poker is really important, but I'm going to have to make sure that I do it through the lens of being a healthy person socially, and then also through my mind and through my body. They're all connected. From there, then I'm able to, it's like kind of like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but the self-awareness really forced me to just accept that as my reality in a good way. The other core values that it helped me come up with were growth, as well as curiosity, and as well as intelligence. Those words can be synonymous with different things that you can think of, but that's why I knew that poker is something that I want to pursue, because it allows me to grow. It allows me to explore, areas of intelligence. It allows me to be curious about different, outputs of how you can play this game. And then the other one, the 5th core value was community, that I came up with, just because I know that whenever I've tried to do things on my own, that I've always gotten way too much in my head, or just kind of experienced bad emotions when I've done it for a sustained period of time, whether it's been like anxiety or depression. That's why I joined this community here. I also made sure in real life to kind of go to more group classes with this friend who owns the gym, like just different things that I can do to satisfy all these core values. And I've been happier ever since. So it's one of those things now where when I really tried to make poker work at different times in the past, whether it was 2016 or 2020, I was like always focused on the money, always focused on my bankroll. And it led me to the mindset of kind of burning out. Whereas now it's like, okay, I respect how important it is to earn this money, what I can use it for to make me a better human, better poker player. But it's just one of those things where I respect it as the tool that it is, but it's not my core value to make as much money as possible. And so that's kind of the mindset shift that this program, had me do. I think the area that I grew the most was self-awareness. Everything after that felt like the cherry on top. After I finished that week, I was like, okay, I got my money's worth. Like everything else is a bonus. Like when I finished the first week, that's when I knew that like, okay, I made a great decision joining this program, kind of thing.
Amazing. Yeah, I think it's really interesting because it's almost like asking the deeper question of why am I doing what I'm doing? And I think often we can set down a pursuit, like say playing poker. It seems really obvious when you're 19, 20. Yes, I want to make money. Yes, the freedom. Yes, the excitement. But then you go down that path for many, many years and you can kind of lose sight of why am I doing this again? What is the real reason? So I'd like to really stop you in the first module and go super deep into what do you value? What are your main values that drive you? So you mentioned curiosity, growth, health, intelligence, community. All those things can be fulfilled through poker, but they don't necessarily need to be. There's other things that can fulfill those. And then when you realize, I'm doing this pursuit because I like curiosity, I like growing, I like learning. How is poker fulfilling these values? And you start thinking of a life in alignment with who you want to be as a person. And you go past what you're doing with your occupation. You think about yourself. So the first module is quite interesting because first of all, we break down everything that you believe about yourself. That's a really one. It's almost like a hacksaw, just going, let's just chop down everything you hold true about yourself, all the foundations. Because I think often we end up building a very rigid structure of ourselves and we try to add layers on top. I think most people struggle in life because they can't upgrade themselves. They're so fixed in who they are and they try to add a layer on top. Where I used to realize, okay, it's all just stories, it's all just beliefs that you're telling yourself. How do we, first of all, come to understand the stories that you're currently telling yourself, and the ones that are holding you back, why don't we just chop them down? Why don't we just look through them and see, that's a story that's holding me back, and I can chop it down. So for you, with any beliefs that were holding you back, anything that at this moment that you had to re-examine, because I know you went very deep into your whole operating system, anything that came to mind in terms of beliefs that you had to overcome to move next level?
I don't feel like there was any big one belief. I feel like there's a lot of small beliefs that weren't serving me. Maybe they had been bigger at different points in time, but I guess through age, I had gotten old enough to just kind of like, the one that comes to my mind mainly is when I was in my late teens, earlier 20s. That's when I really felt like, okay, I need to win at poker to like prove to people who doubted me, like whether it's some friends or family, especially parents, it's like, okay, like this was a good decision kind of thing. And then as time goes on, it's like, okay, well, that's a pretty dumb reason. It's an extrinsic one. Like I should really try to figure out the intrinsic reasons why I'm in this game kind of thing. So I'm sure there was some other ones. It's one of those things where now they just feel flushed from my way of thinking. I don't even remember. I have to go over the worksheets to see what I put down, just because like I feel like I'm tilting less at the tables or just in life in general, just because I'm not having this inner conflict with myself all the time with like these old thought patterns. So yeah, I mean, that's why I just knew after having done the worksheets from the first week, it was like, man, this is some really powerful stuff. Like there was so much garbage in my subconscious that I was able to bring to the surface. It wasn't easy, but it was one of those things where it's like, I think it's going to set me up well for the rest of my life. And then if anything comes up, at least I can have the frameworks to be like, okay, like, is this serving me? I don't think it is. Why am I thinking this way? Whatever. It's one of those things where I can just keep using the program in perpetuity when anything comes up that I feel is just an incorrect way of operating as a human and poker player.
Just a quick announcement that my Poker Athlete program has just reopened. If you'd like to join Scott and the other 50 plus poker athletes leveling up their skills in an immersive community, then this is your chance. I'll be taking on 10 new players in the coming week to level up each of the 8 skills needed to become a poker athlete. It includes weekly live sessions with me and the other members, a full training program for each of the 8 skills, and a full community of accountability to help you to become the best poker player you can be. This is for those of you who are serious about reaching the next level of performance and reaching your full potential as a poker player. So if that sounds like you, click on the link in the description, go through the application form, and I'll reach out to you with the next steps. With that being said, let's get back to my conversation with Scott. Yeah, it's funny because I have the same kind of thing as you, where someone might ask me, oh, Adam, during this patch of your life, what was holding you back? And there's definitely something like a story or a narrative or a belief holding me back. But because I've worked through it and it seems so obvious that that was the case now, and I've kind of moved past that, it's not part of my way of thinking anymore. And I've really got to stop and go, what was it that was holding me back? And then as soon as I remember, go, oh, it was that kind of narrative. It was that story. It was that belief system about money. It was that belief system about what I was capable of. It was that story I was telling myself about why I'm not good enough, something like that. So yeah, I remember yourself, you did lots of the worksheets, and I think you had a lot of kind of belief systems around kind of financial stuff, as well as kind of, how people portray you and stuff like that, and other people's opinions of you that you had to work through. But then you went into the next part of the kind of this framework, which I go into, which is identity. And identity is like the ultimate framework. If you want to think of changing your life, anytime you've made changes that have been long lasting, it's always been at the identity level. So most people try to change their actions. So we get a very behavior dominant. We try to change our habits. However, that always comes downstream of identity. So for example, if I think I'm a lazy person and I try to get myself to get up at 4 a.m, all of a sudden that voice in my head's going to start to go, Adam, 4 o'clock's too early for you. You can't be doing that. You can't get up this time. So we need to change who we think we are. And identity is the the stories you tell yourself about yourself, and it's who you believe you are. Now, again, this is the one where a lot of people don't do any work here. They don't realize the identity you have for yourself at this moment is built on generally your past experiences, but we can redesign ourselves anytime we want. So for you, I'm really curious to know, like, when you were going through this part of the program, what was the identity you were trying to create? Because you mentioned coming in, you weren't where you wanted to be, which means there's a mix between kind of a mismatch between the identity you want to be and who you think you can be. So when you went for this section of the program, what was the identity you were going to strive for going forward?
Well, I knew something that was solidified, and I had to experience it again like this past week. But something that was solidified was that I'm a person who, when challenges come, if it's worth pursuing, if I know it's worth pursuing, then I'm going to just do anything I can to, see it through and get to the other side of it, to the best of my abilities. That's, for instance, like this past week, I hurt my shoulder through doing, like, I was trying to do as many push-ups as I could. And I kind of I think there's an underlying issue with the way that I operate with my left shoulder from like not having great form with it for my whole life. So I think I hurt something in my rotator cuff. I'm going to see the physiotherapist. But I got down on that for a little bit, for a few days, like, man, this is going to hurt my progress here. I'm like, no, I got to focus on what I can control in the meantime. I'm going to see the physiotherapist next week. In the meantime, in the training, I'm going to focus as much as I can with things to do with my legs and any sort of pushing or pulling exercises that don't impact that shoulder. In the past, and this is the same that I would have done for poker, with anything goes wrong, it's like that kind of catastrophizing. That's like, okay, here we go. Like, first thing that goes wrong, and now the whole thing's going to fall apart. So I was kind of like a glass cannon in that regard. Whereas now it's like, okay, like I'll still feel those emotions and they'll come up for a little bit. But then, even today I had to stop myself. It's like, okay, I'm going to the field and I'm going to do sprints, and I'm going to do one arm push up with the good arm on my knees. Like, I'm going to find a way to make this work. That's something that was solidified with this program, because I kind of knew that I was capable of doing that. But now, just whenever something goes wrong, like consciously, and I'm sure unconsciously soon enough, but consciously, that's what I tell myself. It's like, I know from what I've worked through in this program that if it's something that I believe is worth doing, which I know it is because it's my top core value is health, it's like, okay, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to make sure that I'm still progressing, if not at minimum maintaining my health. So that's something that was solidified through the program, because in the past I would have been disappointed, and I would have been pretty disappointed, but I would have been like, okay, I guess I'll just, stop doing this. And like, I might give myself an excuse to like not train for a while, kind of thing. So the program really helps solidify. It's like, if it's a core value, you're going to do whatever needs to be done to get it done to the best of your ability. That's basically it.
Yeah, exactly that. I think once you've got that strong identity of who you want to be going forward, and it's in alignment with your values, all of a sudden, all those kind of inner dialogues that go on become much easier to win. We still have challenges. We still have that voice in our head that tells us to do the easy thing, take the comfort zone. Before this conversation today, I did some mile sprints, which I don't really enjoy doing. Mile sprints I say sprints, the mile interval sessions. And then I finished with 5 minutes in the cold plunge pool. During even like waking up, I thought, oh, do I want to do my mile intervals today? And I was like, oh, not really. But I was like, okay, that's part of my identity. I'm someone who does the hard stuff. Do I want to go in the cold today? Not really feeling it. Again, that's part of my identity to step into these things. So I think once you've got it very clear on the hierarchy of who you want to be going forwards, then the actions come downstream of that, and you can overcome the obstacles. I think this is the big thing that for you what became really clear. Because I remember on the conversations throughout the program, you were like so clear, like this is I know how I need to be right now. I know what I need to do right now. I know whatever comes up, this is how I need to show up right now. So yeah, I think the identity one was a real powerful one for you. So let's transition further in. So you mentioned that the self-awareness module was really powerful for you, and from that you're almost like free rolling because you got value from that. So I feel like what the other kind of skills were helpful for you. So we've got emotional regulation, we've got perspective, which you mentioned that was you were struggling in the past. Yeah, tell me through other skills that you felt added some layers to or tools to your toolkit going forward.
Well, I just wanted to say I'm glad that I did the pre-module assessments before the program even started, like before the first week, because it was one of those things where modules 2 through 8, I just felt like even before I even started it, that I could answer the questions on like a higher level, just because there were certain like things that had doubt, which is why I had lower scores. Where after having done, the self-awareness modules, like, no, it's like, it just seems so dumb to not be better. I don't know. It was one of those things where everything was improved afterwards. But the stress mastery was the one where I was like, I didn't even know that this was a thing I could do. It was really neat and there's going to be other ways I can explore this, but for now I'm really focusing on the Wim Hof breathing. There's other breathing techniques I'm using, and this one isn't in stress mastery, but it's connected to one of the other ones. It was either like presence, something like that, but it was the meditation. What I do is before starting my sessions now, which are live poker sessions, 2-5, 1K max buy-in, I'll be playing higher, so bankroll goes higher. What I do, what I do is I do like a 15-15-15, that's what I call it, but it's kind of more like a 20 minutes each kind of thing, to be like an hour, to just know that I'm ready, and then I play my sessions, where I'll exercise earlier in the day, and if I have not done that, that's when I do 20 minutes of spin bike plus stretching. So that's the first part of the 20. If I already exercised in the day, I don't need to do this. But then I'll do 20 minutes in, right now it's GTO Wizard Trainer, just to kind of like prime my mind. 4 different spots that'll come up. And then I will do 15 minutes of meditation, where I'm just, breathing through the nose and just focusing my breathing. And then the final 5 minutes, I'll still have my eyes closed, but then that's when I will transition to kind of breathing in quickly, breathing out quickly, in a way where I start feeling like tingles in my fingers, my extremities, and it really starts activating me. And that's when afterwards I'll just expel like all my breath and just hold it as much as I can, to the point where I feel like I'm going to like pass out. And then I take in a massive breath, and I just feel so awake at that point afterwards. I like to do this as much as I can, kind of in the parking lot, but like a far away spot where people aren't really going to see me, because otherwise it looks weird. But at the casino, because like I'll do the trainer stuff, the spin bike stuff at home, then I'll drive to the casino, and then I'll do this meditation / breathing thing, and I just feel ready to go afterwards. I think that's been the biggest thing. There's been some days where I'm very fatigued from like maybe playing late the night before, and I'll start doing this warm up, and I can just tell like I'm just not there, where like I don't feel like bracing with my core to do some planks during the spin bike like stretching part, or I don't feel like focusing on spots and being curious about it. And that's when I'll know it's like, okay, I probably shouldn't play today. I should probably focus on some other things like meal prep and get a good night's sleep, and then go to the casino earlier the next day. And in hindsight, that's probably helped me quite a bit. I probably saved me from having a couple of disastrous sessions that really would have hurt my overall win rate. So that, I'm pretty sure, it came from presence. And these are just things that I was never doing before. These are things where like I would do some form of warm up, but it wouldn't be consistent. It may be like a walk outside, and I'd call that like a warm up and be ready to go. But now I just have a lot of different tools from different aspects of the program that have allowed me to just, really cut out the bad parts of my game and how I operate as a human. So that's basically that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I remember for you, stress mastery was the one that really give you a lot of kind of final tools to add to your kind of repertoire.
Yeah.
And the way I think about it, like, and the way that the stress mastery, I teach that part of the course is all about understanding that we want our physiology to be at a certain like activation level for the activities we're doing. And very often we'll leave this to chance. We almost like go to do something, we're like, not feeling it today. And we use the energy of our state in that moment randomly to dictate, like, should I do this? Should I not do this? And also dictates how we perform and what we do. In reality, our physiology is very much within our control. We can get back in our control of our physiology in 5, maximum 20 minutes, almost always. We can go from a low energy state to a high energy state very, very quickly. And if you haven't learned to do this, you need to do some work on it, because if you're feeling lethargic and you can't get yourself activated and ready to go within 20 minutes, you need to do some work on that, because there is skills and tools. So for you, I remember you were doing well on the higher activation. So I talk about basically there's a kind of sweet spot where they kind of this middle, almost like a bell curve in the middle. And that's where you kind of have this optimal activation for playing poker activities you do. As you go higher in activation, let's say you've had a coffee, you've done some Wim Hof breathing or a cold shower, you're in the higher activation states, and some people enjoy that. They perform slightly better when they're slightly more activated. Others, that's too much for them. I've got some friends who are this category who, if they have a coffee, just too much, like just takes them too far. Their mind goes too active, almost like overthinking stuff. So they do a little bit better on the just under the kind of peak activation zone. But it's all about thinking, what do I need to do to my physiology to get me ready for what I'm doing, and how can I systemize this? So for you, you created like habits and routines. I remember in the program you were talking about like going to the car park to do your kind of meditation, going for walks to the casino, but trying to find a way to how do I apply these concepts which can seem rigid at times, but how can I apply them to my life and what I'm doing? And what I love about you were like from day one, like a scientist in your own life. You're like, right, I love this concept. I'm going to use this one there. I'm going to use this one on that break, that time. I finished that grind session, so I'm going to use this tool here. So yeah, I really like how you are piecing together different tools at different times. And that's kind of what my kind of goal from the program is, to teach you all the toolkits, and then you guys are going to apply them in your unique lifestyle for your own goals, for your own things. So yeah, that's really, really good. I think for you, meditation was something you've done prior to that. The way I teach meditation is slightly different to a lot of practice, but mine's generally focused on training the skill of focus. So we're very much intentional of like watching, concentrating on the breath at the nose, and we're really trying to zone into basically all the intricacies of the breath. And then when the thoughts come, we watch them come and go, but we're training a very specific skill of focus, where other meditation practices can focus on, just a bit more calming, a bit more kind of lowering stress overall. But yeah, I think it's good to have it as a tool to increase a certain variable. So for you, anything else in terms of tools that you learned throughout the program that really helped you? I know energy optimization you mentioned as well at the end was a very good one. Yeah, tell me for any other skills or tools that were useful.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that most of the time I need to, because I'm doing live poker, it kind of slows me down, and it's nice to be able to have a way to activate yourself, like after 2 hours for just sitting there, especially your card dead. But there are some days where, let's say I've done like an intense workout that morning and I'm still kind of riding the high of that, and I go to play later and I still need to calm myself down. It's really nice to be able just to do the slow breaths. I usually go out to the smoking area off to the side where I don't smell the smoke, and I'll just kind of look off in the distance into an area that's like 100 meters away or more. So that way I can just kind of reset my gaze, just kind of, zone out, slow breathing. And it only takes like 2 or 5 minutes. And it was just really nice to be able to feel in control at all times of just how I feel. Because I know that was a big tilt factor in the past, of feeling like, okay, I've rocked into a session and I can't get myself engaged, or I feel way too engaged. I'm trying to 3-bet like terrible combos or whatever. Like that was, for me, stress mastery was a big cherry on top of all the other stuff. What other things? There was a YouTube video you released that had things click for me in terms of perspective and resilience, where I had issues in the past with, maybe it was, I'm trying to think of which one it was, but you were able to combine both resilience and perspective together by, when you have a good perspective on how you play the game and downswings, you're able to be more resilient when things go poorly. So I didn't really figure that out before. It was one of those things that video just really clicked for me in that regard. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that came up, but there's all these little things in the program like that I just really just clicked, and now I can't see myself thinking any other way, basically.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? And this is the one where the way I try to teach the skills as well, like when I really thought about it, I figured out, well, I had 8 skills which I thought were really important from all my coaching experience of working with players. And I spent a long time going, well, what order can I teach these skills so that you learn one skill and that sets you up better for the next skill that comes after it? That's how I start with self-awareness. Then I go into emotional regulation. Because I think if you do self-awareness, then emotional regulation, from there, like focus, for example, which comes after, is much easier. Because a lot of the obstacles that get in your way of being able to focus, the mind's too active, emotions are coming up, you haven't got the right identity, so you're fighting lots of conflict. Whereas if we remove those, it helps you going forward. Then perspective is a really, really powerful skill, where I started to realize, like working with lots of players, that the guys who are the most resilient, the guys who have the strongest mindset overall, have developed good perspectives. So perspective, the way of thinking about it, it's a framework of seeing situations. And the way to look at that, almost everything that we interact with in life, every situation we see, we don't see it as it is. All right, well, that's maybe an alien concept to some people, but we see it through a lens. We see it through our own filters. So if we like just strip that away, we can see in more situations, if not all situations, start off quite neutral. And then our perspective can shade that as either good or bad. So let's use an example of a losing poker session. Let's say you've just lost 10 buy-ins a poker session. In reality, that's quite a neutral situation, but the perspective is often, this is a bad thing. I've just lost 10 things, so 10 buy-ins, sorry. And that can like spiral very quickly. So when we train perspective, we learn to train ourselves to go, oh, I've put on like a negative perspective here, or a maladaptive perspective. How can I change the way I'm looking at this and look for a positive, look for a reframe, look for something of this current situation that seems all doom and gloom? What's the positive angle I can take from this that gives me back some control? It might be, okay, I've lost 10 buy-ins today, but I'm still having a winning month or a winning year overall. Or it might be, okay, what can I learn from this session? I've tagged loads of hands. I'm going to do a study session to learn from it. So you always look at life with, what can I take from it? What can I learn from the situation? And as you mentioned, when you do that very well, all of a sudden you solve a lot of your resilience problems. Resilience is the ability to deal with adversity, deal with downswings, bounce back from challenges. I'm actually writing this part of the poker athlete book right now in terms of like adaptive and maladaptive responses. We can maladapt, which means you adapt in a way that basically takes you away from your goals. And adaptives where you adapt in a way that is proactive, moves you towards them. And then once you do that well, that's generally perspective skills to have adaptive responses. So yeah, I think it's linking skills together and realizing, okay, how do I see things more clearly? If I do, that solves a lot of problems. I think for you, from my memory, I remember self-awareness being huge for you. I think perspective was actually a big one because perspective helped you to be more resilient. I remember stress mastery, kind of linking all the things you're doing with your body and activating yourself. And then energy optimization was kind of the icing on the cake to get more energy to upgrade everything about yourself. So yeah, I think for you,
especially with sleeping too, I was better with what was it? The other aspects of energy optimization, like my food and exercise. But in terms of sleep, and I'm still working on this now, but you know, poker, and I'm sure everybody watching this video can relate, unless you're playing like an early morning schedule, but it goes into all hours of the night, especially if you're playing MTTs. And I just struggled with this so much in the past. You know, my sleep schedule would be all over the place, and that would lead to me being lethargic a lot. Now it's one of those things where I know the games are juicy at night, so I like to reward myself like once a week, whenever the time feels right. Let's say the game's really good and I'm like, you know what, I haven't played late in a while, I'm going to do it, and I'll probably take tomorrow off or to, you know, be a little bit more chill with it. But for the most part, as the night goes on, I try to kind of weigh the EV, like the life EV or whatever, in terms of like, okay, is this spot really that good? I'm gonna, you know, suffer for it tomorrow. And then in the morning, I will often try to wake up at the similar time each day, as well as it's been really nice in the summer. It's going to get tougher as winter goes on, but I'll be more aware of it at that time. Just going outside and just getting some natural sunlight in. I'm always in a better mood as a result of that. And that's something that I wasn't consciously aware of before this program. So now it's like, that's an added tool on top, similar to stress mastery. It's like a cherry on top. That's how I feel about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think when it really clicks in your mind, like for me personally, it became so black and white probably maybe 5 years ago when I really started to track my sleep with the Whoop tracker and really go into recovery. If you want to be a high performer, a consistent high performer, whatever that means to you, you've got to optimize recovery. You can't like just shortcut it. There's no way you can get away with it if you're in your early 20s and you go, I can sleep about 4 hours and then get by. Yep, you can take shortcuts in the short term, but if you want to be a long-term, consistent high performer, you need to optimize recovery. It's almost like a seesaw. Performance here, recovery here. You need to like kind of get them back in tandem. And I think a lot of people have lots of untapped potential. It's quite really exciting actually when I speak to players. I'm like, wow, you're doing a lot already, and your recovery sucks. Imagine when you sort your recovery out, what you're going to be able to do. So I think for you, you were already doing a lot of stuff, and you've got that kind of drive, that resilience, and that kind of ambition to push yourself. But once you started working on recovery, like, actually, I've got a lot more energy, and also figuring out which things are too costly. I think I like what you said there about like the trade-offs. Like say you're playing a long poker session, if you're a live player, sometimes that's worth it. Somebody's like that. Those games are amazing. I felt a bit groggy the next day because I didn't sleep as well, but it was worth it. It was a good plus EV opportunity. Other times it's like, you know what, like this is going to make me feel really shitty. Do I want to sacrifice my routine, my sleep, just for a few hours extra in this current game dynamics? And a lot of time the answer is no. A lot of times sacrificing your health and your long-term feeling good so you can perform good is not worth it. I know for myself in the past, especially during my kind of high volume supernova elite days, I would make a lot of these decisions and I would often go, yeah, it's worth the kind of short-term feeling tired. Now it gets less and less worth it. It's almost just like feeling good is worth way more than anything you can pay me financially. So I was like, I'm going to take less and less of these shortcuts. I'm going to always optimize recovery. And I think when I speak with high performers, they often converge to the same kind of thing. It's like, all right, comes a point where feeling good, being able to perform good outweighs kind of the short term. Obviously, like I said, there's decision points to make where it does make sense. It's like actually once every few weeks or a very big game is playing and you know you're going to play a 20-hour session because that game is super juicy. That's awesome. But in general, like a lot of the time you go, I want to feel good tomorrow. I'm going to optimize recovery to make sure I do feel good. So, all right, I have
a question first. When you said that as you get older, or now you can't pay me enough to, you know, stay up late, is that because of age, or is that because of like just how in tune you are with like the Whoop track and you're like, I can never go back? Basically, I laugh at that point. It's like, oh, that's what I have to look forward to getting old. And then, you know, but anyway.
It's because what I value more. All right. So if I look at my values, yeah. So as you mentioned, values are the hierarchy of everything we do, right? So we've been very clear. So for me, feeling good is one of my highest values, but growth is my particular value. My highest value is growth. Now I know if I want to grow, if I want to learn, if I want to push myself and give to the world as well as growing, I've got to be well optimized, kind of feeling good to perform well. So for me, recovery is a non-negotiable. I know if I don't sleep well, I'm not going to be able to grow and perform. So I could take X amount of money in the short term to have a bad night's sleep. It's not like I can't push myself to do that. It's like it's not in line with my values. My value isn't to have X amount of money in the bank account. It's to be a version of myself. So the identity would win that argument. So one part of me would go, Adam, stay up late and make the extra money. And the other one would go, but that's not who you want to be. That's not in line with what your values. You won't get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go for your run and meditate and do your ice bath because you'll feel groggy. So it's just a clarity of who I want to be. However, that doesn't mean that's for everyone. Some people are going, oh, actually, achievement is my number one value. Success and getting the most money or whatever it is my highest value. So for them, it's actually easy the opposite way. They go, yeah, of course I stay up late because it makes me more money. Like, why would I not? So it's just getting very clear as you understand who you want to be long term going forwards. These decisions become so easy that, yeah, you can make them so clear. If someone put an X amount on a check, there'll be a number, obviously, that I'd stay up for. But most times go,
Right.
nah, I'm happy with what I'm currently doing. I'm in alignment now, and you're going to try and drag me out of alignment, and that dragging out of alignment isn't worth it for me because I'm happy with the current line.
For me, it's like 6 days of the week, I'm the exact same as you. It's like, okay, I want good sleep. I want to have a good routine. 1 out of 7 days of the week, I enter Goggins mode, and I'm like, I want to take their soul. I'm going to do everything I can tonight to just, outplay them to the best of my ability. And I know they're getting tired, and here we go. So that's basically it for me. But yeah.
Yeah, again, so that's in line with your values, right? So it's in line with your growth, yeah. And I get that as well, like
growth, yeah.
Yeah, I get that Goggins mode as well. Sometimes I want to push myself really hard. I just rarely do it at the cost of recovery, just because I can't. I'm unfortunate at this stage of my life. I don't have to. If I didn't have the option, say my only opportunity or vehicle to kind of go Goggins mode and push myself was in the late dead of the night, like it is for you sometimes, I'd probably take that opportunity. Like, right, I'm just going to go into that. So yeah, it's the life circumstances you find yourself in and what opportunities you have available. All right, I'm really curious to know for you, how is life different now you've gone through the program? So for you, you've learned a lot of skills. You feel like in a much better mindset. Talk us through like how your day-to-day life is different. We can use this in the context of playing poker. How is a day in the life of Scott playing poker different after going through the program compared to before?
Well, I rock up to sessions with far less anxiety because it's like, okay, I've done my routines. I feel very confident in my abilities in this game, and I feel like I'm in a great frame of mind. And if I was to exit that great frame of mind, I feel very confident in my ability to get back into it. So basically, I have less fear in sessions because there'd be times I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back on it, where let's say that I made a bluff that I wasn't super confident about, and then I got called, and it was like a big river spot or something. I might be concerned that would put me on some sort of tilt in terms of I wouldn't have the frameworks to bring myself back to a solid state of mind. I felt like there was a lot of ways that one thing could lead to the other, catastrophizing glass cannon, that things could just go wrong that I'd be very kind of anxious about. Now it's just feels a lot easier. Things will come up, but I have proper tools in terms of how to address it and think on it later. And these will come up in many different ways. Like a few days ago, I had a situation where just the vibe of the table was just really bad. Like there was a lot of kind of like bad rigs there that just, for whatever reason, just decided to just keep complaining about like how bad they're running. And it was one of those things where I stepped away from the table, but then I gave myself, it's like, okay, like I just feel grateful for being in a position where I just feel I have more tools than these guys do, not just in terms of strategy, but also in terms of how to operate as a human, where I don't feel the same way as they do. Just I went through I think this was emotional regulation, this one, but that's one of the ways where I operate differently with regards to poker and how I do now. Maybe it's more confident in myself. Maybe I just feel better about myself as a poker player and human, and my ability to get in volume without tilting at little things. Basically, I think that's one of the ways.
Yeah, it's almost like I've got the toolkit to handle everything that throws my way. It's such an empowering feeling to realize I'm armed with everything I need to succeed in life. I'm armed. Whatever comes up today, I'm ready. There's going to be a lot of things that I don't like. There's going to be a lot of annoyances, a lot of situations that frustrate me, things not go my way. But you know what? I'm ready. I can handle all of that. And I think that's such an empowering position to be in. So for you, it's that whole framework, how you see situations is completely changed. So I'm interested to know for you, has anything changed results-wise or performance-wise? And obviously, playing poker, there's a lot of short-term variance that can go either way. But for you, obviously, we can see you're showing up as a better version of yourself. Have you noticed that paying off in your strategy or the way your results overall in poker. I know for the program itself, so what I do to show players how much progress they're making is you do an assessment before you start each skill, and you do an assessment at the end after you've done the skill, and there's a progression from beginner to intermediate to elite. Most players start their skills either beginner or intermediate, and through the program, if you really apply yourself, you definitely have the opportunity to go to elite over the course of the program. If not, keep working on the skill till you do. You've got all your skills to elite. So I can see in terms of the toolkits, the frameworks, you've went for elite in all 8 skills. I think you're the 3rd person in the community to do that. So well done for that. So in terms of results, in terms of how that's showed up, because I always think like for myself, I'm trying to almost like show players like developing these skills is going to really help you as a poker player, obviously as a person as well. You're going to get better scores at all these skills. That's going to set you up better for poker, and that's going to transition into better results at the tables. So for you, have you noticed any change in terms of results or how you're showing up at the tables?
Yeah, it was mid-July, so about 8 weeks ago at this point, from when we were doing this call, when I really started kind of getting into live poker more. I had dabbled in it. Obviously, I played it back in 2019, but I had taken a hiatus from it during the deliveries and was doing a lot more online. I had started coming back to it, and then it was mid-July when the program started is when I switched to, part-time, then a few weeks later to full-time poker. So in the time since then, I've done like 120, 130 hours, something like that. I'm still working on getting my volume higher, but I've run very well. I think I'm also have a pretty decent hourly, but I know I'm running above expectation right now, but my actual hourly during this short sample of time has been something like $130 an hour. So it's one of those things at 2.5, 1K max buy-in. I just feel like I'm seeing a lot of things that I just don't feel clouded by tilt in different ways, whether things are going poorly or if things are going well. It's really exciting. That's when I found my best results, because stacks will get deeper and I'll have a deeper stack to do stuff with. And I just feel like another aspect of the game is I can see other ways that people are, reacting poorly or failing in ways they could have played better if they had done the Poker Athlete program. I'm trying to think of a specific example, but just I can tell someone's focus is drifting off and they're not taking the measures they need to regain that focus or consider quitting the game. What else? Oh, emotional regulation, like something will happen and I can see it set them off, and then I can interpret how they're going to, change their strategy accordingly and how I should change my ranges. Just different things like that maybe I wouldn't have picked up on as much if I didn't do the program. But now I just feel like, especially when I have a deeper stack, that I'm in the matrix, or like, or I can like a Neo kind of thing. I can just see different ways that they're not even thinking about, in terms of they're trying to think about, what they should do with ace king or something. And I'm just out here just understanding the emotional factors as to why they're going to do different things. So to me, that's been really rewarding, honestly. Yeah.
I love that. It's almost like you get yourself to a certain level that you can see when other people aren't at that level. It's the same as like, say you study solvers for quite a long time. You get to a level where you understand how they work on a quite a deep level, and you realize, wait a second, all these guys haven't got a clue. Everyone's making lots of mistakes. How can I exploit them? So for you, you've got yourself to this point where you're very centered, you're very calm, and you can see other people who haven't developed these skills. They haven't got the focus. They haven't got the motion regulation. And you go, there's a leak here. I can exploit this massively because you're not doing the things you need to get yourself back into that framework. I can exploit you in all these ways. Yeah, amazing. So I think for yourself, it's just very clear that you're just very in control right now. You feel very confident in your strategy. Things don't throw you off. And I think that's the main thing as a poker player. It's not always going to be smooth. It's not always going to go well, but you need to develop a toolkit that you can sit there for as many hours as you want to and play the strategy that you've come to the table with. You can be focused. You can play at a high level, and you can bring your best game to the tables. Then poker's going to mess with you. People are going to mess with you. Things are going to happen in the short term and long term that you don't like. Have you got the toolkit to deal with those? And that's when it really comes into the forefront, where it's like, when you're on a downswing, can you handle that? Can you really push through that in a proactive way? Because some people try to go through downswings by kind of surviving, showing up, doing some volume, but they're really just like prolonging a really mediocre / bad performance zone, when in reality, like a downswing should be a very massive growth patch. You should be learning a lot. Your mind should be so curious. You should be excited to wake up to try and solve problems, to dig yourself out of it. So yeah, I think for you, you've built a toolkit right now, which has made you a really strong mindset in poker, and I think that's the main thing. So in terms of going through the program itself, what did you enjoy most? Was there anything that resonated with you the most, or that you didn't expect coming into the program?
I really like the way that my perspective changed in terms of how I view results. It's one of those things where now, whenever, like, let's say I've doubled up and I have like 2K in my stack, it's not one of those things. I know some people will be like, oh, like, should I cash out? I've got $1 grand. I don't want to lose it, or something like that. I'm over here thinking, okay, now here's the new toolkit I have. And I just feel my perspective is way better. Like I very rarely catch myself thinking it's like, okay, like here's like how well I'm doing in terms of my hourly. Like I checked it before this call because I knew you were going to ask that question. But to me, it's one of those things where it's like I'm just focusing on my health and the process of growth, curiosity, and intelligence, as well as being a part of the communities I need to be a part of in order to make sure that I'm operating properly. The money just seems to be coming second. I respect how important it is, but whenever I'm playing now, I just see it as a tool to be able to achieve the greater means to like who I'm going to be as a person. That's something that I kind of felt briefly at different times before, but this program really solidified that for me. So I just felt happier as a person and more fulfilled after having taken this program. So yeah, my perspective changed a lot, as you can tell. But yeah, that's a big one that comes to my mind. Yeah.
What did you like about how the program was structured? I know like I've got quite a unique way of teaching this program. I do a lot of assessments, a lot of tracking, a lot of in-depth. Also, like we do this as a community. So the way the program works is we do 1 skill a week for 8 weeks, and then we do a 9th week, which is kind of your ongoing training. There's 10 of us together maximum on a coaching session, and we really go deep on 1 skill per week. So for you, anything you liked about the structure it was set up, and how did that help you to solidify some of these skills, Paul?
What do I like? Well, I love that it was spaced out over 8 weeks. There was times where I wish it was like we had more time for each skill. Like I wish we had 2 weeks almost, just because I'm just figuring out 1 skill out. It's like, all right, next, and I'd be like, oh dang it, I'm just starting to get good at this one. But then in hindsight, it was the appropriate amount of time because it just would have taken way too long to do the programs otherwise. But then if you try to cram it in any shorter period of time, then it definitely would have been too overwhelming because you need time to be able to implement them during the week of your sessions. So 8 weeks is very solid. I really like that. And I really like that there's ongoing training. I know I haven't been at the past couple coaching calls because of games that have gone late in my own time zone. I'll change that moving forward. It's one of those things where whenever I have time, especially after sessions, I'll often go through the worksheets again and think to myself, okay, like, is there any way that I can be kind of, taking the next step on these things? Especially if I start to feel kind of a lull with things. I think that was how I felt with like emotional regulation. Like the other day I was inspired by one of your shorts and I was like, okay, let me look at the worksheets for this again. I was like, oh, maybe I should consider ways that I could be better at this for my next session. And that's when something had come up. I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to think of a different framework for how to address this properly. So I really like the program. 8 weeks is solid to learn the skills. And then you have ongoing training from there so you can keep applying the things to your life. I think it's great.
Yeah, exactly that. So it's 8 weeks. So it's like an 8-week crash course. And as you mentioned, sometimes you go so deep in one skill that you want to spend a bit longer on it, but then we go into another skill the next week. But my kind of philosophy with it is, as you said, like we've got to pick a time frame where we can learn as much as possible, like relatively. And then my whole thing is, okay, after the 8 weeks are over, you can go back into the skills and really work on them. And I always try to give you guys a progression where you know what your current level is for the skill and where you can improve. And as you mentioned, this is a kind of a reason I call it the Poker Athlete program as well, is you're always in training. All right, you're never done. Like even though now all your skills are kind of elite, you're not done. You don't check out the game. It's not like you're like a sports star doesn't become like a #1 player in the world and go, all right, done with training now. I'll just keep showing up and crushing everyone. You keep training, you keep working on stuff, and then sometimes things go well, and you just kind of keep things in balance. Another thing, things got out of sync a little bit, and you go, actually, I need to fine tune that skill. I need to go back into it. So I try to create the program in a way where no matter where you're at, no matter how much time has passed, you can jump back into the program and go through the skills and know which training program to do. And then every week there's live calls as well. I like to do the live coaching every single Monday. So we set goals together, we overcome problems together, and even though you've done the program already, there's still something we're working on, still trying to be doing. So I think that's a really strong point. So for anyone watching this right now, I'm going to be reopening the Poker Athlete program. We're going to be doing immersive 8 weeks of going through each skill per week, like Scott's done. There might be different skills for you that you're struggling with. Maybe it's focus, maybe it's resilience or presence. But we go deep on each skill, and you'll know at the end of it which skill you need to work on. And we'll go through a whole framework of how to develop that skill from the current level you're at to the next level. I think that's often missing for players. They hear a lot of advice, they watch a video, but it's kind of taken out of context. You've really got to know, like, where am I currently at for this skill? Myself, like, I currently work with a strength coach. And what's really good about that is, like, he knows my current level. So he sets training relative to where I am to get me just that next level. If he sets my training too advanced, it's going to be too much for me. If he says it's too beginner level, I've already passed that level. So we need to always be training relative to the level we're at. So I think creating progressions is going to be very useful. So what would you say, Scott, to somebody who might be on the fence about joining the program? I know for yourself, you were eager to get started, but some of the players may be going, sounds good, but maybe I've already done like a lot of mindset stuff. I've already developed my mind. Maybe I'll struggle a little bit, but I'm not sure I'm ready yet. What would you say to someone who might be on the fence about joining the Poker Athlete program from your experience?
Was thinking about this the other day. Like, I think if I personally, I think if you're playing live and you're like a winning 1-2 player and you're looking to take the next step, for sure this program is great for you. Also, if you're playing online, like at least like 10 or 25 and L. If you're anything less than these things, you should probably just absorb as much free content as you can from Adam's channel, and while working your game, and then like take the step into this program. And to me, it's gonna bear fruits for the rest of my life. I'm very confident on that. And whether I've just been running hot or whatever in these live games, I've already made back the money that it cost me to put in this program by a decent margin, in a way that I just feel like there would have been sessions where maybe I punted off by like not having a good warm-up routine. So I feel like I've knocked out some of the losing sessions I would have had. And then for the winning sessions, I feel like I'm able to, like, there was one session where I played for 15 hours and had my best result ever at 251K max, where I won 6K, where, every like 2 or 3 hours after having played for like 6 hours straight, or it was actually every 1.5 hours, I checked in on my focus levels. I could tell they were going down, but I did some of the breathing work, or I did what I needed to do to be able to refocus and, play against players who had big stacks that were losing focus, who I could tell would be great targets, great EV spots, just different things that I wouldn't have thought of before when it comes to this program. And so there's just so many ways that if you're on the fence, that I just feel like it's a tremendous way to boost your EV in ways that you wouldn't have previously considered. That's basically it.
Yeah, well, I want to thank you, Scott, for this conversation today. You've been a really amazing student. Like every single week, you've shown up on the live sessions, asked good questions, done all the worksheets, done screenshots. So you've really dug into it. I love when players really get engaged in like the pursuit of getting better and learning, because that's the thing as well. Like when you're doing any sort of form of coaching, it's definitely not passive. Like you're definitely, it's a bilateral relationship where the coach is trying to provide a good framework and how to think and how to do stuff, but then it's on you to actually learn, to study, to really put the work in. And for you, from literally session one, even the pre-session that we had a conversation, I knew that you were going to really get stuck into it and really apply yourself, which you've done. So going forward, obviously, we're going to speak a lot because obviously every Monday we have a live session together. But yeah, I want to thank you for your time today and also for the effort you've put in during the program. Hopefully you can inspire some other players to either absorb my content, to start working on it. But the main thing is to start working on these skills and start developing them. If you want to do it in a framework, in a really structured way, the Poker Athlete program opens occasionally, which is opening now, so you guys can check out the link below. But if you just want to absorb content and go on your own personal pursuit of getting better, leveling up skills, yeah, hope you can do that as well. So thank you very much, Scott. Any final words for anyone listening today?
I think that you're underrated, and I'm very happy to have been a part of this program. That's basically it.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Scott. All right, thanks for your time.
See you, Adam. Thank you.
Now, just a quick reminder before you go, my Poker Athlete program has just reopened. If you'd like to join Scott and the other 50 plus poker athletes in leveling up your skills, then this is your chance. The program starts in just a few weeks, so don't delay, and there's only 10 spots available. It involves live coaching, interactive sessions, a full training curriculum for you to advance each of the 8 skills you need to become a high performer. If that sounds like you, click on the link in the description, fill out the application form, and I'll be reaching out to you with the next steps. I thank you for your interest in the Poker Athlete concepts, and I hope to see some of you guys on the inside.